Hello and welcome again to my channel, Jayla Bamba. This is Jamila Olor. I'm back again with some more about drug, the science and culture behind psychotropic drugs. We are at chapter 8, and sorry for taking so long with this book, but I just didn't have um, that much of a structure. I didn't compel myself uh, to do it by the deadlines I thought I should be doing it. Mainly because I'm doing it like just for the heck of it, because I love sharing things. I love um, communicating what I know about things and hear from others, and because I wanted to interact with people and hear their opinions and know more about such things. And I'm interested, very interested in scientific things, medicine, pharmacology, psychology, you name it, and all that concerns human life and our lives on this planet. So now we are at chapter 8, the man with the dragon tattoo. We'll know about this man after we discuss briefly the quotation the chapter starts with. The author opens the chapter with a quote from Francis Bacon. It says, Francis Bacon, who famously quoted King Solomon, all novelty is oblivion, comparing this very quotation to a similar idea from Plato that believed that knowledge is nothing but a remembrance, or what we are living now is nothing but an echo of what has already been lived before. So, should we talk about the Bacon, Francis Bacon historical cycles and how human life caught in a loop of repetitive patterns, cycles, and how religion, wars go hand in hand, and how civilization growth and collapse also go hand in hand, and how language, knowledge, and appear and disappear and get reinvented or rediscovered. I do not think I have that kind of knowledge, or I do not think the scope of this presentation allows for that. Uh, but since the book is about the science and culture that yielded such science, we'll probably might gloss over it by the end of the book of this chapter. The author has spelled out his intention since the first chapter, and that the focus is on both science and culture that yielded the pharmacology. We have seen how infusion plants, infusion is a word that ethnobotanists neologized to refer to certain plant that, because of their psychedelic effects, that allows these people to see extraordinary and live extraordinary experience. That's how religion might have sprung at the beginning. So, and also such thoughts shifted our paradigm of thinking, because a religion might have started very earlier than the cycle where Jean-Jacques Rousseau has placed it. Let's not dwell on it too much, as I said, and go back to our man, Robert Fortune, Esquire Robert Fortune. Is the man in the dragon tattoo. We are in rural China, miles and miles ahead of countryside beauty and cloud-blanketed mountains stretched out as far as I can see. This is how Robert Fortune is presented to us. He is Robert Fortune Esquire, the botanist and director of the Chinese Chelsea Garden in London. He was hired by the East Indian Company to sneak in Chinese food in the region and steal tea. Yes, tea was stolen. So to succeed in his mission, and cutting lines, shove aside all those lined up boatmen to get into the borders, he had to hire a previously imperial servant who still had the imperial seal. And then he also got clad in Chinese dignitaries of the time and had a dragon tattoo in his wrist. And that's how he just had to present these things and got ahead in line. Now let's talk about the thing he wants to steal, the liquid jade, the very precious thing that China guarded jealously for centuries and centuries before it's presented it to this world, before it got stolen from its people for the benefit of the whole world. Now, all kinds of tea are derived from Camellia sinensis, C. sinensis plants. Thanks to Robert Fortune, its botanical nomenclature had become known in the 19th century. He was also the botanist that gave this particular name to this plant. The buds and leaves are picked and dried. They vary from green to black. Enzymatic oxidation affects the breakdown and their chlorophyll. This process can be slowed down or halted by roasting or heating. Tannins, a bitter astringent polyphenol compounds, a chemical that these plants have, and other chemicals are produced as you steep them in water, and changes in color affects taste. We have always, all people who drink tea have experienced such thing. You steep tea in boiled water, and the longer you leave it, the darker it gets and the bitter it gets. So the original name of tea, as found in ancient Chinese texts that date back to 700 BC, was chu, T-U, chu. And of course, it was found as represented by a Chinese ideogram in texts dating back to 700 AD. Cha is what both Chinese and Japanese still use for tea, or cha. So, te, te, pronounced te, is still used in Fujian. As a Moroccan who drink green tea a lot, we call it ate or te. But the Arabic name for it is shai, which is close to ocha and tea. Both tea and cha are still used in Britain. You know, if you hear fancy a nice cup of cha, I hope I didn't mess up the British accent too much, but that means they're referring to tea. So tea is drunk as infusions. There are infusions with different plants and are called tea, and the only tea that we can refer to as tea is dried camellia leaves and pods. Others are not tea, they are called tisanes. In Morocco, I'm going to refer too many times to Morocco as I'm talking about tea because a nation of tea drinkers. So we add tisanes to tea. We had other herbs, and then these we call tisane, and then we add tea. But for the author and for the actual definition of things, what should be called tea or what is really tea is only the dried leaves and the pods of C. seneces or Camellia seneces plants. Subtropical weathers are ideal for growing tea. The cradle for the ancient tea culture is China. Now, higher elevations, example Fujian or Indian Himalayan areas, moist weather and mild temperatures yield a high quality superior tea. Shunnon, the father of Chinese ancient medicine, studied herbs and plants for therapeutic potential. Taste tasted how this happened according to the urban legend or the history as what had been reported in historical books. Um, he was boiling some oil and a dried leaves of tea or dried leaf of tea fell in the boiled water, and then he drank that very water or that very mixture, and he found that it energized him, and he liked the bitter taste, and that's how the culture of tea drinking was sparked. Now, Pen Chao Ching, the earliest Chinese pharmacopoeia, a compendium of non-Chong wisdom, recorded some properties of tea. Better than wine, does not lead to intoxications and loss of judgment. Better than water, as it does not lead to disease since it gets infused in boiled water. We have similar thing where I came from. They say tea is the Arab wine, the Arabs' wine. So now let's talk about tea conquers Europe. It was brought to Europe by Dutch and Portuguese traders as early as 1600 AD, together with other spices. Tea got to England after the Glorious Revolution of 1688 with the rule transfer of the Dutch monarchy. If you are interested in knowing about that, Google it, please. So that means the Britain has had a Dutch monarch starting a certain time. Tea drinking became favored even over coffee. Black tea with milk and sugar became early tea drinking habits. The increase in drinking tea meant increase in demand and the need to import more. It has become profitable business. Government income from imposed taxes rose to make 10% of Queen Victoria's treasury, or the country's income while under the rule of Queen Victoria. A world tea culture emerged where drinking tea and accompanying paraphernalia became the dynamo of social life. Tea houses opened where coffee and chocolate were also served. We're going to talk about these in the next sections. Fine china sets became highly sought because now we have a culture of drinking tea, and it came from a very ancient culture in some parts of the world where they have certain rituals, almost rituals for drinking tea, that starts with having tea sets and certain, like porcelain tea sets, or what they call china. So the British people also started that kind of thing and were impressed by it to the point that Staffordshire porters manufactured and marketed their own white and blue Ming and King-like Chinese set. There was a very worldwide known Chinese China pottery, and it was called Ming and King, and the British manufactured similar ones and started selling them. The British monarch in 1600 granted the charter to the governor and company of merchant trading in East Indies. The charter gave them the right to monopolizing trade with the Orient. The East Indian Company and its partners grew so powerful that it became the fact government. de facto government, as to quote the author. They became a government on their own. They fought wars and raised armies, printed their own monies, and run India on behalf of the British Crown. On the other hand, entering China was impossible. They could do all these things, but China was the dead wall. The company's trade with China was restricted. Trade was only allowed at Port Canton. Two of the major trades the company had with China were opium and tea. Tea had become a social habit in Britain. The only exporter was China. That's a problem. So now Europe is trying to conquer tea. By that, they're trying to conquer China, right? So Europe did not enjoy doing business with either China or Japan. They thought they were unfriendly people with horrible religious beliefs. The port of Canton remained the only place for trade until the 19th century. The Japanese had even more stringent measures for trade that was allowed only on man-made island Deshima, Nagasaki Harbor. So the British felt cheated of their silver. They kept pouring into China's treasury at the expense of theirs. A fact that kept going until the 19th century. So they decided to tilt the balance in their favor. To do so, they had to hook China on opium, which was illegal in China and Chinese territories. The British encouraged illegal trade and smuggling of opium through the Chinese borders. The Chinese opium addicts became the target customer. It became an issue to the point that Chinese authorities threw British opium cargo in the harbor, leading Britain to attack a few Chinese ports in retaliation. China sought a peace treaty with the UN in 1842, and the Chinese government was fined and had to pay 2 million in silver dollar for damage to Britain because they threw their cargo in the waters. That is how they couldn't pay, so they had to surrender Hong Kong to the British. China lost its monopoly over tea trade, and so did the East Indian Company. Other competitors from both Europe and America entered the game. Yet, growing and processing tea remained a Chinese exclusivity. Britain had to steal the precious jade plants. That is how the East Indian Company elected Robert Fortune, a trusted botanist who had already infiltrated the Chinese borders and took a few ornament plants to Britain. The tea plant and seeds are known for their delicacy and would not be able to survive long sea journeys. To protect them from the elements, they were shipped in the Wardian case. The Wardian case was a primitive terrarium protective glass-sided container to Calcutta. They shipped them to Calcutta, then to the Himalayan foothills with similar elevation and climate to the Fujian region, Darjeeling area. And now that's how you see the Darjeeling tea that you buy and drink. Robert Fortune's mission was a success. India, British territory back then, became the major and main caterer for the motherland tea habits. Let's have some break and I'll talk to you in a few minutes. Welcome back, and let's have some coffee. Now we've talked about tea, we had some tea, let's have some coffee. The arrival of coffee. Coffee has also rivaled tea in popularity in social life and has equally drawn pharmacology interest. It came from the home of Africa. Ibn Sina, known as to the Occident as Avicenna or Avicenne, um, 1000 AC, mentioned coffee in his Al-Qanun fi Tib, romanicized as the canon of medicine. Um it comes from the coffee plant genus, and it's written Coffea. I feel tempted to pronounce it coffea, but it's coffee like Chelsea. It's written ch. It's written ea at the end, but still you pronounce it Chelsea. So it comes from the Horn of Africa, and we talked about how Ibn Sina mentioned it in his The Canon of Medicine. It comes from the coffee plant genus. There are two types of coffee, coffee arabica and coffee robusta. Sufis in Yemenite town Mocha were known for using coffee in the 16th century. And then the book brought an anecdote, like, you know, how uh, a boy was taken with the cattle in the field, and how, like, he brought some of these beans to the priest, and the priest just told them no, and then threw them in the flour in the fire, and then the aroma of the fire enticed him to try and put them in a kettle, and that's how they started drinking coffee, according to that. So, and the author warned us again. That I said it's not verified thing. Um, so the Turks place it in the center of their social networking. Coffee shops sprang and became dens for social and political discussion and plotting, to the point that many coffee shops were closed down by law in Istanbul and Cairo, and that's true. Coffee has then reached Venetia, and there and then the rest of Europe. The Dutch turned it their trade and created plantation for it in Java and Ceylon. Coffee and cafes became popular social hangouts for the politicians and intellectuals by the mid 17th century, and continued to be so until our current time. Now that's about coffee. Let's talk about the chocolate, the bitter and sweet. Chocolate came to Europe from the Honduras shores. Columbus brought it as a gift to the Spanish monarch Ferdinand XVI. Ferdinand in the 16th century. He believed they were almonds, but they were cacao beans. Chocolate was used as a drink by the Mesoamericans and called cacahuete, made of brewed ground beans, vanilla, honey, and spices. Chocolate spread from Spain to Italy, then to the rest of Europe. 19th century, a Dutchman, Van Houten, developed a way to isolate the bitter fat cacao from the water-soluble matter. That is how they turned it into a solidified edible bars. Before it used to be just a drink. Now you can have it as a powder, you can have it as the bars, and you can also use the powder to make a drink, to pour it in your milk, or just use the liquid one. The company of Fry and Sons in 1847, London, was the first to market chocolate bars, and we have been eating them since. Now, Goat's question and Wrong's reply. We're going to get into the chemistry now. Tea, coffee, and chocolate have been linked together not only because they were social drinks, but for their psychotropic effect as well. They are psychostimulants. So how do they work? Modern organic chemistry in 19th century had very great interest in the chemistry of natural products. We have seen that, right? Caffeine had been isolated, discovered, and it was thanks to great German poet Goethe, a leader of the Romantic movement and natural scientist. Philibert Friedlieb Runge, a German chemist who was a fan and friend of Goethe, uh, found out that he could dilate his cat's pupil by using a drop of a deadly nightshade plant belladonna. And he wanted to impress his idol, so he went to him on a visit and showed him how he could add a drops of belladonna, how he could instill drops of belladonna in his cat's eye, and how the cat's pupils dilate. So Good was very thankful for that, was impressed, and then he invited him to a cup of coffee. And as he was leaving, he gave him some beans and asked him to study them. A few months later, Rong isolated caffeine, an alkaloid he named after coffee plants. Caffeine belongs to a group of alkaloids uh, called collectively as xanthines. Xanthine are psychostimulants, xanthines or xanthines, and these found in tea, coffee, and chocolate. Theobromine and theophylline are found in chocolate. Theophylline is also found in tea, but to a very small, in very small amounts. Emil Fischer, the Nobel Prize, was Nobel Prize for identifying its structure in 1881. Trimethylxanthine, just like excedrin, which includes both caffeine and the anti-inflammatory acetaminophen. He also synthesized his own. He synthesized his own caffeine, and it can be found in soft drink and over-the-counter meds such as excedrin, which includes both caffeine and anti-inflammatory acetaminophen. Caffeine is the most consumed psychostimulant substance. It takes its effect in 1 hour, lowers fatigue, and increases focus. It is believed to enhance cognition, processing info, complex tasks, example language, etc., etc. That's what it is believed. So all those abilities are affected by neurological disorders such as Alzheimer's disease. Caffeine is a psychostimulant that is being researched for reversing or controlling the AD noxious, the Alzheimer's disease noxious effects on cognition. So this also we have to talk about further. Now the ATP, adenosine triphosphate, the energetic neurotransmitter. We'll have to talk about that because it's involved in this. The original concept of neurotransmitter has been expanded. It no longer includes acetylcholine and biogenic amines only, but can include peptides, lipids, and even adenosine triphosphate, also known as ATP. Cells make ATP for storing energy and transport and even other important reactions to happen. It also contributes to the synthesis of cyclic adenosine monophosphate that is important for cell signaling. All this activity happens within the internal confines and internal environment of the cell. It also plays a role outside the cell. Harvard scientists in 19th century, in 1920s, in the 20th century, around 1920s, have proved that ATP was the source for released phosphorus from isolated mast cells. They injected ATP in dogs intravenously, and it disrupted cardiac rhythm, inhibited its contractility of intestinal smooth muscle, and dilated the coronary artery. Later, it was confirmed that ATP, when injected in the brain or PNS, produces effects on the nervous system. It has been confirmed that the brain releases ATP as it releases other neurotransmitters. Adding ATP can produce synaptic junctional neurotransmission when acetylcholine and norepinephrine are blocked. This phenomenon is referred to as NANC, non-acetylcholine, non-adrenergic neurotransmission. Since such synaptic activities were triggered by ATP, by adding ATP, neurobiologists such as Birstock posited that ATP was a neurotransmitter in addition to other functions. How do how does ATP, adenosine, or how do ATP, adenosine, and similar substances produce their effects? A scientist at National Health Institute in Washington, D.C., John Daly, added adenosine to neurons and observed it increased cyclic adenosine monophosphate within the cell, cyclic AMP. Another experiment proved that caffeine and methylxanthines blocked the effect of adenosine. Obviously, adenosine has a receptor which can be blocked by caffeine and methylxanthines in general. Caffeine and adenosine analogs were synthesized and proved their specificity as agonists and antagonists of adenosine effect on cyclic adenosine monophosphate in neurons. John Daly also used Solomon Snyder's help to prepare radioactive samples or assays of his N6 cyclohexyl adenosine agonist and antagonist 1,3-diethyl 8-phenylxanthine analog of adenosine and caffeine respectively. The putative adenosine receptor was revealed presumptively. Such finding helped develop a new concept of neurotransmission. It is called purinergic neurotransmission. A large number of receptors have been identified for adenosine, P1 receptors, and P2 for ATP. 4 types of P1 adenosine receptors have been identified and lab cloned. All are GPCRs. They are A1, A2A, A2B, and A3. At least 8 of the ATP receptors also have been identified and labeled as P2 gamma receptors. They are all GPCRs and mediate different ATP effects. Others, P2X, are ligand-gated ion channels and with multiple subunits similar to GABA receptors. Purinergic signaling is ancient and most used in regulating bodily functions, the book reports. Adenosine A1 and A2 receptors are widely spread in the body. Caffeine and methylxanthines, although not very selective, act on P1 adenosine receptors, have a higher affinity for A1 and A2A adenosine receptors that are most expressed in the brain. An experiment showed that when the gene of P1 adenosine receptors had been removed, caffeine did not produce any psychomotor stimulation effect in mice that lacks A2A receptors. Other effects, such as sleep, wakefulness, and cognition, may be A1 adenosine receptor related. Caffeine effects can be integrated within the norm of our daily life. That is why it has become part of accepted social life behavior, although it is a psychostimulant, but it's still a normal part of our normalcy, part of our normal behavior now. There are other psychostimulant substances that disrupt and affect our daily life, such as such as cocaine, which is what we are going to talk about in the next session. Now we have talked about the very benign psychostimulants that we love and share with others and invite others to share with us. And now we got to the point to the very dangerous ones that also have been put to use in, for therapeutic benefits. And when they are used as such, they could be good. If they are used in different way, or they can be very harmful. Now, cocaine reaches Europe. Cocaine is another pharmacological discovery, the new word offered to its discoverer. It started used as a pharmacological treatment. European explorers observed native Indians chew cacao leaves. They saw these people chewing those leaves, and the botanical name for this is Erythroxylon coca. They used it both as a stimulant and local anesthetic. Vincent Valerde, a missionary who accompanied the Spanish conquerors to South America in 1539 and later became the first resident bishop in the new land, reported that cocaine leaves gave the natives refreshment and strength to endure their daily hardship. So they didn't see it initially as a negative thing. Another priest in 1653, Bernard Cabo, reported that he had a toothache, and another monk, advised him to chew cacao leaves, and that relieved his pain. Chewing the cacao leaves habit soon became the newcomer's habit also. The Gentleman magazine in 1817, 19th century, reported that masticating coca leaves empowered natives to overcome hunger and fatigue. Organic chemistry bloomed in the 19th century, and many interesting substances were isolated from natural products. Alkaloids such as morphine and caffeine were isolated. Coca leaves similarly drew the attention of organic chemistry, but cacao leaves, similar to senecio leaves, were poor travelers and would not stand the long sea journeys. German scientist Karl Scherzer was able to get a large sample of fresh coca leaves ashore safely. He handed them to a professor Göttingen University in Germany. The latter handed them to Albert Niemann as an investigation subject for his doctoral thesis. Albert Niemann isolated the white crystalline chemical that produced numbness when he placed on his tongue. It was cocaine. Now, if you watch those mobsters movies where people smuggle cocaine, and you see them tasting it, and they could make the difference with whether it's sugar and or cocaine, that's because of the effects of the coca. It numbs the tongue. So they put it here, and then their tongue becomes numb, and they said that's the right thing. So Albert Niemann died after he discovered mustard gas, and and another Göttingen university student took over his projects, and the name for this one is Wilhelm Lawson. He clarified the chemical structure of cocaine in 1865. Richard Willstader, a Nobel Prize winner who studied pigments in plants such as chlorophyll, obtained the formula for cocaine in 1898. So the formula was known since 1898, and the chemical structure was clarified in 1865. It is a tropane alkaloid, that is to say, heterocyclic tropane group containing cocaine is structurally related to atropine that is commonly used in as a muscarinic acetylcholine receptor antagonist. It is a substance isolated from the deadly nightshade plant, also known belladonna. Long used belladonna to dilate his cat's pupil. The question is whether both the psychostimulant and the anesthetic effects come from the same part of the molecule, bipartite structure. So this substance produces both anesthesia, local anesthesia, and also has a psychostimulant effect. And its structure is complex. And does it come from one side of the structure or the other, or does it come from both structure, from all the chemical as a whole? Because then if they find out it comes, let's say we have two sides here and there, and if you find out that this is the responsible for stimulation, and this is the one that's responsible for anesthesia, you try and identify one, you try and remove one, and then work with the other one, because that's what you need. You don't need the other one. So the question is whether both psychostimulants and the anesthetic effects come from the same part of the molecule by partite structure. Sigmund Freud, remember that guy? He's a psychoanalyst, psychotherapist, the one known for all those theories in psychology and psychoanalysis. He got interested in this substance, the psychostimulant effect, and the anesthetic properties. He shared his discovery after self-experimenting with ophthalmologist Carl Keller, who got interested in its potential as a local anesthetic in ophthalmic surgery. He got wide acclamation and published his research in The Lancet. So Freud got it, experimented with it, found out that it has both psychostimulant effects and anesthetic effect. He handed it to an ophthalmologist, Carl Keller, who found out that it indeed acts as a local anesthetic, published a research paper or article, and was very well read and prized for that. I mean, they appraised his article. The American surgeon William Halstead read his article and decided to use cocaine as a nerve block, and successfully used cocaine as a local anesthetic, performing dental surgery on his students. Cocaine adopted as a local anesthetic in the medical field. Its widespread usage came to a halt because of its systemic toxic adverse effects and its adverse effects on the cardiovascular system. The search for a more benign or local anesthetic that's like cocaine but doesn't have those side effects to be used in anesthesia started. The tropane side of the molecule was not the responsible for the anesthetic effect, and it is the responsible for the cardiovascular side effects. So they shifted their interest to the benzoic acid side of the molecule. Amino acids and amino esters analogs were synthesized. Hush Pharmacy, is it Hush or Hush? Pharmaceutical company was soon to introduce lidocaine and procaine to local anesthesiology. Cocaine is still used in certain ENT, eye, nose, and throat surgeries for its local anesthetic and vasoconstrictive effect. It's for the anesthesia, and it vasoconstricts the blood, so it minimizes the bleeding. And they need such thing in areas where they have to perform some kind of microsurgery, or, So from coca to coke. Now all the world to a certain point who had access to Coke, Coca-Cola, had a taste of cocaine. Now, cocaine recreational use started in the 19th century and flared in Europe. 1859, Paolo Montegassa, an Italian neurobiologist, self-experimented with coca in Peru and wrote a paper on the hygiene and medieval values of coca. He stated that coca produced a mad mental rush in high doses. Cocaine use increased in Europe after novel ways of taking it emerged. It was readily available in drinks and tonics. The Corsican Angelo Mariani developed and sold Vin Mariani. I don't have the book right by my side, but there is a picture about that wine, and it's called Vin Mariani, a concoction of cocaine and claret, a wine, cocaine, and good Bordeaux sold also as well. So they added cocaine to the wine, and they sold it, and it sold very well. And this guy was very smart and knew that he needed advertisements, so he sold the benediction of the Pope. And then a very famous rabbi, so to beat down the competition, Angelo Mariani sold the benediction of the Pope, and the chief rabbi, got some pictures with them, and said that they were okay with that, and they even drank it or something. He also sold lozenges, cigarettes, and that's his actual trade. John Pemberton, a drugstore owner in Columbus, just to interrupt this, they didn't probably do it on ill intentions, because they thought it helped. It was helpful. But I don't know. So he also sold lozenges, I said, and that was his, and cigarettes and wine probably was his actual trade. John Pemberton, a drugstore owner in Columbus, Georgia, his Pemberton's French wine, coca. Since Fulton County started enforcing the prohibition laws started around that time, so they banned alcohol and all kind of alcohol sale. So he had to create a non-alcoholic beverage. And that alcoholic beverage was soft drink that is still now. It's cola, and it has nut extracts and a natural source of caffeine and other products. It was the birth of Coca-Cola. It was initially, I think it was initially called, it is Coca-Cola, just as it's written now. It had both cocaine and caffeine and was labeled as a nerve tonic. It has all those flavors of all those nuts, cola nuts and extract. And then they added caffeine, they added cocaine, and it was sold. Cocaine content is now and has turned into negligible since 1903. They stopped it. Now even they use the coca leaves now. Coca leaves are still used as a flavoring agent, but after they deplete them of the cocaine content. They just leave the flavor, not the chemical itself. That's what they said. That's how they sell it. It's still there, but it's just the flavor, not the thing. Now, cocaine hit the streets. Packy Davis, drug company in Detroit, produced cocaine hydrochloride. Looks similar to crystallized salts, measured carefully and dispensed or sold it that way. See, all those movies, when they line up those fine lines of white powder and then go through that and then snuff them. So that was actually sold in pharmacies. They had a kit for it. They developed a packet and also produced a cocaine taken paraphernalia, little boxes including syringes, needles, and supplies of cocaine that It can be injected intravenously, and also the ones they can snuff. Paki Davis advertised cocaine as a drug that could make the coward brave and kills pain and makes you eloquent. Since 19th century until the beginning of the 20th century, cocaine was legal. From that century, from the time when it entered Europe, from the time when they saw the Native American chewing leaves, to the 20th century until the 1916, it was something you could legally use and buy over the counter. New ways of preparing, selling, using cocaine has continued to emerge and exist. Now, after it has been illegal, some have still continue. They continue to be creative in how to use it. In 1980s, freebase cocaine or crack and crack have become mainstream methods among users. They collected and dried cocaine leaves into crystalline rocks, and that make crackling noise as it is being heated, hence the name crack. In a spoon like tool, and they smoke the vapors, they inhale the vapors, and that allows the absorption through the pulmonary circulation and gets to the brain in seconds, because the brain, the lungs are highly vascularized. So cocaine is dangerously addictive. Now we understand that. The ones who pioneered its use, such as Halsted and Freud, ended up themselves addictive. Those very highly acclaimed scientists and even idolized, and their book has still been as displayed and assigned in curricula and taken as authorities in fields, or just sometimes even from historical perspective. We still study these books and have them and see what methods they use. But those guys have ended up being addicted. Sometimes, people, for the sake of the science, if that was their intention, they ended up being victims themselves. So now, ephedrine and amphetamine. Now, I need to draw your attention to specific points. This chapter is about psychostimulant, dedicated to psychostimulant. Probably the book has glossed over them here and there while in other chapters, but before we have seen the other one, the one that produced depressant effects. And these are the opposites. They are psychostimulants. So ephedrine and amphetamine. Methamphetamine, while less ancient than cocaine, research on another ancient substance paved the way to its birth. The ancient Chinese Ma Huang prepared a mixture of the plant Ephedra vulgaris. The preparation was used for asthma treatment, as it is a powerful bronchodilator. See, the intentions always start good. So this, as a substance, is a powerful bronchodilator. It is suspiciously similar to cocaine in many ways. It suppresses fatigue and hunger and stimulates. The active chemical agent of Mahuang was isolated in 1885 in Japan. The Western world discovered and resynthesized it in 1923 and labeled it as ephedrine. A few years earlier, scientists discovered that glands in our bodies secrete active molecules and labeled them hormones. Example, adrenaline, epinephrine were secreted by the adrenal glands. And we have the synthetic ones. Park Davis manufactured and marketed epinephrine in 1901. Epi or epinephrine is a powerful pressor that constricts the blood vessels and dilates the bronchioles and can therefore correct anaphylaxis and shock. And that's what is used now to reverse the effect of anaphylaxis and to dilate the bronchioles in certain cases of extreme, crisis. For example, when you have when your person is about to have a respiratory arrest because of bronchoconstriction. It stimulates sympathetic branch of the ANS, that is to say, is sympathomimetic. They are responsible for the fight and flight response. And we're talking about epi and adrenaline secreted hormones. Adrenaline success prompted the research for other drugs with similar profile. Ephedrine came as a result of such research. Ephedrine effect extends beyond the periphery and reaches the CNS faster than adrenaline. It is also a more powerful vasoconstrictor than epinephrine. It can be used both as a nasal spray or a pill. Eli Lilly sold it as a decongestant. It was an over-the-counter drug until the Food and Drug Administration regulated its use in the early 21st century. Since Eli Lilly almost exclusively marketed it, other companies started the research for a chemical with properties that are similar to those of ephedrine and adrenaline in 1929. After self-experimenting with the substance, it was concluded that it induced palpitation, insomnia, and a feeling of good being. The substance was no other than amphetamine, a variation of alpha-methylphenylthylamine, worked as a decongestant but ineffective as a treatment for asthma. People felt exhilarated on taking it. The drug was marketed by SmithKline and French ch8 company. The first synthesis of the substance was actually in Germany in 1887, while its chemically related structure, methamphetamine, was synthesized in Japan in 1920. The psychoactive effect of these substances remained obscure until later. Smith, Klein, and French wanted to sell it as a decongestant inhaler under the name of Benzedrine. Amphetamine and methamphetamine sympathomimetic effects did not differ a bit from those of cocaine. The drug was given to soldiers in World War II to overcome fatigue. Students used it as a study aid, and it was also used as a diet pill. Ecstatic effects of amphetamine. While trying to synthesize a styptic agent, that is to say, a hemostatic agent, the one that stops the bleeding, with properties similar to hydrastatinine, patented by Bayer, a semi-synthetic alkaloid isolated from Hydrastis canadensis by Merck scientists. They used an intermediate 3,4-methylene dioxymethamphetamine, MDMA, which is similar to amphetamine. Merck used it as a synthetic intermediate, They did research its psychedelic. They did not research its psychedelic effect. They were not interested in that. They were trying to find something that would stop the bleeding. When adding a 2,5-dimethoxy 4-methamphetamine, uh, DOM, or adding a 2,5-dimethoxy 4-iodomethamphetamine, DIN, it becomes a powerful psychedelic agent by just adding these structures at the beginning of the adding to the actual methamphetamine. They come up with these. And MDMA is an analog of mescaline, which means it is a hallucinogen. Alexander Shulgin, if you remember in chapter 2, we talked about him and about how he started that tradition of those drugs that design drugs. So he synthesized a variety of amphetamine derivatives. He self-experimented with MDMA, and reported that it was both psychostimulant and hallucinogen, entactogen. Similar to LSD, MDMA got adopted by modern psychiatry in 1950s as an adjunct pharmaceutical treatment modality for some time. It became a street drug in 1980s. The notorious ecstasy is a type of a drug David Nichols labeled as entactogen, as we've seen in chapter 2. MDMA and mescaline are phenethylamines, a very interesting chemical compound that allowed Shulgin and others to synthesize a plethora of drugs by playing around its nucleus. Amphetamines, although still abused, are also still used clinically for their psychostimulant effects. Adderall, for example, is a mixture of amphetamine salts used in narcolepsy and ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder in children. Methylphenidate, Ritalin, an amphetamine analog, is also used for ADHD. It has a high potential for abuse and sometimes caused people to commit suicide because they go through those highs and they go again into depressive moods. Basically, it triggered a kind of bipolarity mood issues in those people. And this triggered really, there was a lot of debate and people even lobbied against its use. So now psychostimulants and biogenic amines. I'll talk about this in the next time. I should stop now, and because I want to go through for a few points that I will dedicate more talk about. So until tomorrow, I'll see you tomorrow, and then I'll finish this and then talk to you more about the previous points, and then we discuss a few things such as treatment for Alzheimer's and neurosyphilis and all those things. Those are in other chapters, in the last chapter. So have a good night and see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.